The sun had not yet risen, but Abena was already awake. Every morning was like this. Inside the wooden walls of the slave quarters, she would open her eyes in the darkness and for one moment forget where she was. Then reality would hit her. There were no chains, perhaps, but she was not free either. Abena was 22 years old, beautiful, intelligent, and dangerous. At least that's what Master Whitmore thought. Because Abena could read, she could write, she could think. And these were the most dangerous weapons for a slave to possess. When she stepped out of the cabin, the cool morning air hit her face. The cotton fields waited silently in the distance, while the big white mansion stood on the hill. Abena's heart always quickened when she looked at that house, because there, inside that grand home, was little Clara. Clara was Master Whitmore's 8-year-old daughter, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, curious child. Her mother had died in childbirth, and her father tried to raise her with strictness and coldness. But Clara was different. Clara was the only white person who loved Abena. When Abena entered the kitchen, old Mama Ruth looked at her and shook her head. Mama Ruth knew everything. Her eyes were old, but nothing escaped them. Mama Ruth spoke while stirring her pots, telling Abena she was going to that little girl again. Abena didn't answer. She just smiled and began arranging bread on a tray. Mama Ruth whispered for her to be careful, warning that Master Whitmore was watching her. He knew she was intelligent, and that frightened him. Abena stopped. The bread in her hand trembled. She explained that she loved Clara, that the girl was like a sister to her, and that she meant no harm. Mama Ruth softened, saying she knew, but white men didn't understand love. They only understood power. And with every word Abena taught Clara, she was giving her power. Abena took the tray and walked toward the stairs. Her heart pounded in her chest, because Mama Ruth was right. Every day she secretly taught Clara to read and write. Every night she would quietly enter Clara's room, showing her letters by candlelight, teaching her words. What would Master Whitmore do if he found out? Abena didn't even want to think about it. Clara's room was pink and white. The walls were covered with silk fabrics, the floor with soft carpets. Every time Abena entered, she felt like a stranger. This world was not hers. It never would be. Clara sat by the window, watching outside. When she saw Abena, her face lit up. She shouted Abena's name and ran to hug her. Abena smiled and stroked Clara's hair, wishing her good morning and telling her breakfast was ready. Clara didn't even look at the food on the tray. Instead, she looked at Abena's dress pocket, asking if she had brought today's lesson. Abena looked around. The door was closed, but she was still afraid. She pulled out a small piece of paper from her pocket. Written on it were words she had carefully chosen: freedom, hope, love, family. Clara took the paper and examined it carefully. Her lips moved, silently pronouncing the letters. Then she looked at Abena, her eyes shining. She spelled out freedom with pride. Abena's eyes welled with tears. This little child treasured every word she taught like it was gold. Clara might not know it, but every word she learned would one day bring change. Abena praised her and asked if she could use those words in a sentence. Clara thought. She put her pencil to paper and slowly began to write. Abena stood beside her, watching every letter. Clara wrote, "I want Abena to have freedom." Abena's heart stopped. She looked at Clara. The little girl was looking at her with tears in her eyes. Clara asked why Abena was a slave, why her father wouldn't set her free. Her voice trembled with the question. Abena took a deep breath. Clara had asked this question before, but each time it became harder to answer. Abena explained gently that this was how the world was, but maybe one day it would change. Maybe Clara's generation would change this world. Clara nodded. She promised that when she grew up, she would free Abena. She gave her word. Abena smiled, but her heart ached, because she knew how powerless Clara was in this world. But still, there was hope. There was always hope. That night when Abena returned to her cabin, Mama Ruth was waiting for her. Her face was tense, her eyes worried, Abena asked what had happened. Mama Ruth took a deep breath and revealed the terrible news. Master Whitmore was going to sell her. Abena's world spun. She asked why, her voice breaking. Mama Ruth explained she didn't know. But she had heard that traders were coming the next morning. They would take Abena and several young men to another plantation. Abena collapsed to the floor. Her hands were shaking. Clara, she couldn't leave Clara. What would that little girl do without her? She whispered that she couldn't go. That Clara was like family to her. Her only family. Mama Ruth sat beside her and held her hand. She said she knew. But staying would be worse. Master Whitmore had learned what Abena was teaching Clara. If she stayed, he would punish her. Abena's blood ran cold. She asked how he found out. Mama Ruth shook her head. Someone had informed on her, maybe another slave, maybe a servant. She didn't know, but now they knew. Abena didn't cry. She couldn't, because a plan was forming in her heart. A dangerous plan, but it was the only thing she could do. She announced that she would escape that night. Mama Ruth's eyes widened. She asked if Abena was crazy, warning that they would catch her and kill her. Abena responded that if they killed her, so be it. But she couldn't leave without seeing Clara, without saying goodbye. She had to leave her something. She had to leave hope. Mama Ruth shook her head, but said nothing, because she saw the determination in Abena's eyes. This young woman would not turn back now. At midnight, Abena walked to the big house one last time. She went barefoot, so her footsteps wouldn't be heard. Her heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. She quietly entered through the side door of the house. She climbed the stairs. As she approached Clara's room, she felt her hands trembling. When she opened the door, Clara was sleeping. Her small body was curled up under the blanket. Her face, peaceful. Abena entered and sat on the edge of the bed. She stroked Clara's hair. Clara opened her eyes. When she saw Abena, she smiled and asked what she was doing there. Abena's voice cracked as she explained she had come to say goodbye. Clara woke up instantly, asking where she was going. Abena took a deep breath and told her that her father was selling her. She would be leaving tomorrow. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She protested, saying Abena couldn't leave, that she would tell her father and stop him. Abena held Clara's hands and told her no, not to do that. This was how it had to be. Clara cried, asking why, saying Abena was her only friend. Abena smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks. She explained that she would always be with Clara, in her heart, and one day when Clara grew up, she would change this world. She would give freedom to people like her. Clara nodded, still crying, and promised she would. Abena pulled out a small piece of paper from her pocket. She had written something on it. She handed it to Clara and told her to keep it and never forget. Clara opened the paper. Written on it was, "You are free when you free others. Never forget who you are." Clara pressed the paper to her chest and sobbed. Abena hugged her one last time, breathing in her scent, feeling her small heart beating. Abena whispered that she loved Clara. Clara said she loved Abena too. Abena stood and walked to the door. She didn't look back because if she did, she wouldn't have the strength to leave. When morning came, the traders arrived. Master Whitmore stood in the courtyard, waiting for Abena, but Abena was not there. When they went to her cabin, it was empty. Abena had escaped. Master Whitmore shouted in fury. He released the dogs, sent his mounted men, but Abena had vanished. Clara watched from her window. There was pain in her heart, but also hope. Abena was free, and one day, Clara would be like her too. She still held that small piece of paper. She would never let it go. Years passed like shadows. The Civil War came and went. Slavery was abolished. Master Whitmore died a broken man. His plantation burned during the war. Clara grew up in a world that was changing, but not fast enough. She never forgot Abena. She never forgot those secret lessons by candlelight. She never forgot the words written on that paper. When Clara turned 25, She did something unthinkable. She used what little money she had inherited to open a school. Not just any school. A school for freed slaves. A school where black children could learn to read and write. The white community was outraged. They threatened her, called her a traitor to her race. But Clara didn't care. She thought of Abena every day, and Abena's courage gave her strength. One autumn afternoon, an elderly woman appeared at the school. She was thin, her hair white, her hands gnarled from years of hard work. But her eyes were bright and knowing. Clara was teaching a class when she noticed the woman standing in the doorway. Something about her felt familiar. The woman smiled, tears streaming down her weathered face. Clara's heart stopped. She knew those eyes. She had seen them in her dreams for 17 years. Clara whispered Abena's name, barely believing it. The old woman nodded. It was her. Abena had survived. She had made it north, lived as a free woman, and now she had returned to see what had become of the little girl she had taught so long ago. They embraced in the middle of the classroom, both women crying. The children watched in silence, not understanding the profound connection between these two souls. Abena looked around the school, at the books, at the black children learning their letters. She looked at Clara and said she was so proud of her. Clara held Abena's hands and told her she had kept her promise. She was freeing others by giving them education and hope. That day, Abena stayed at the school. She told the children her story, the story of a slave who taught a white child to read, who escaped to freedom, who never gave up hope. And Clara stood beside her, holding that same piece of paper from all those years ago, now yellow and fragile, but still carrying those powerful words. You are free when you free others. Present-day Atlanta, Georgia. Zara Washington sat in the sterile conference room of Morrison & Associates, one of Atlanta's most prestigious law firms. She was the only black woman in senior management, a position she had fought tooth and nail to achieve. But lately, every achievement felt like walking through fire. Her direct supervisor, Rick Morrison, had just passed her over for promotion again. The third time in 2 years, the position went to Chad, a white man who had joined the firm 3 years after Zara and had half her case win record. Zara sat alone in her office after the announcement, staring at the framed law degree on her wall. She had graduated top of her class from Harvard. She had won cases that made headlines. She had brought in millions in revenue for this firm, and yet she was still invisible. Her phone rang. It was her grandmother, Mama Jean, calling from the nursing home. Mama Jean's voice was weak, but insistent. She told Zara she needed to come visit her right away. There was something she had to give her, something important. Zara drove to the nursing home that evening, exhausted and heartbroken. When she entered Mama Jean's room, the old woman was sitting up in bed, holding a worn leather box. Mama Jean explained that this box had been passed down through their family for generations. It was time for Zara to have it. Zara opened the box carefully. Inside were yellowed letters, faded photographs, and a small piece of paper, carefully preserved in plastic. The paper was so old, it looked like it might crumble at any touch. Mama Jean told her to read it. Zara held the paper up to the light. Written in careful, deliberate handwriting were the words, "You are free when you free others. Never forget who you are." Below it was a signature. Abena, 1855. Zara's hands began to shake. She asked who Abena was. Mama Jean smiled, her eyes distant with memory. She explained that Abena was their ancestor, a slave who taught herself to read, who taught a white child in secret, who escaped to freedom and spent her life helping others. Mama Jean continued, telling her that Abena's story didn't end with escape. She became a teacher, an activist, a voice for those who had none, and the white child she taught, Clara Whitmore, became one of the most important advocates for black education in the South after the Civil War. Zara looked at the letters in the box. There were dozens of them, correspondence between Abena and Clara that spanned decades. Their friendship had endured despite everything society tried to do to break it. Mama Jean gripped Zara's hand with surprising strength. She told her that she came from warriors from women who refused to be broken. The blood of Abena ran in her veins. She couldn't let them defeat her now. Zara's eyes filled with tears. She asked what she should do. Mama Jean told her she knew what to do. Abena's words said it all. You are free when you free others. Fight not just for herself but for everyone who comes after her. The Reckoning. Monday morning, Zara walked into Morrison and Associates with Abena's box under her arm. She went straight to Rick Morrison's office and requested a meeting with him and the senior partners. Rick was annoyed, asking what this was about, saying he had a busy day. Zara's voice was calm but firm. She told him to make time because what she had to say concerned the future of the firm. An hour later, Zara sat across from Rick Morrison and 3 senior partners. She laid out her case like she was in court. She presented documentation of every time she had been passed over for promotion. She showed the disparity in salary between her and her white male colleagues with similar experience. She presented emails where Rick had made subtly racist comments, microaggressions that added up to a hostile work environment. The partners shifted uncomfortably. Rick's face turned red. He protested that this was ridiculous, that Zara was playing the race card, that she just wasn't partner material. Zara didn't raise her voice. She simply said she had already filed a formal complaint with the EEOC. She had documented everything meticulously over the past 2 years. She also had 3 other black attorneys in the firm ready to come forward with similar experiences. She wasn't asking for anything for herself anymore. She was demanding systemic change. She wanted the firm to implement transparent promotion criteria, mandatory diversity training, and an independent review of all personnel decisions for the past 5 years. One of the senior partners asked what would happen if they refused. Zara smiled, the same smile Abena must have had when she escaped that plantation. She explained that she had already been contacted by 2 major news outlets interested in the story. She also had interest from a prominent civil rights law firm willing to take the case pro bono. She would sue, and she would make it public. The firm's reputation would be destroyed. The room fell silent. Rick looked like he wanted to explode, but the other partners held him back. They asked for time to consider her demands. Zara stood and told them they had 1 week. Then she walked out. The fight continues. The next few weeks were brutal. Rick Morrison tried to make Zara's life hell, assigning her impossible deadlines and menial tasks. But Zara didn't break. Every night she would come home to her apartment and read Abena's letters. One letter in particular gave her strength. Abena had written to Clara in 1867. The chains they put on our bodies are nothing compared to the chains they try to put on our minds. But we are unbreakable. Every time they push us down, we rise stronger. This is our inheritance. This is our power. Zara read those words over and over. Abena had faced actual slavery, had risked death for freedom, had spent her life fighting an entire system. Zara could endure a few hostile colleagues. 3 weeks after her meeting, the senior partners called her back. They had agreed to most of her demands. Rick Morrison would be undergoing mandatory training, and his behavior would be monitored. The firm would implement new promotion criteria, and an external consultant would review their diversity practices. It wasn't everything Zara wanted, but it was a start. More importantly, 2 other black attorneys came forward with their own complaints. The firm was being forced to reckon with its history of discrimination. Zara didn't celebrate. She knew this was just one battle in a much longer war, but she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope? A new beginning. 6 months later, Zara made a decision. She left Morrison and Associates and opened her own practice. She specialized in employment discrimination cases, representing people who had been treated the way she had. She called her firm Abena Legal Services. On the wall of her office, she hung that precious piece of paper, framed and preserved. You are free when you free others. Never forget who you are. Her first client was a young black woman who had been fired after reporting sexual harassment at her tech company. Zara took the case without hesitation. As she prepared for trial, Zara thought about Abena teaching Clara by candlelight, risking everything to pass on knowledge and hope. She thought about Clara opening that school, defying her entire community to honor the woman who had changed her life. And Zara understood. Freedom wasn't just about herself. It was about the woman who came after her, and the woman after that, and all the generations to come. Every case she won was a small act of liberation. Every person she helped was another link in the chain that Abena had started forging all those years ago. The reunion. 1 year after opening her firm, Zara was contacted by a historian working on a book about post-Civil War education in the South. The historian had found extensive documentation of Abena and Clara's work, including the school they had built together. The historian asked if Zara would be willing to share the letters and documents she had. Zara agreed, on one condition. She wanted to visit the site where the school had stood. 2 weeks later, Zara drove to a small town in Georgia. The school building was long gone, but there was a historical marker where it had been. She stood there, holding the box of Abena's letters, and wept. A voice behind her spoke, asking if she was okay. Zara turned to see an elderly white woman, probably in her 80s, standing with a walker. The woman explained she lived nearby, and often came to this spot. Her grandmother had attended this school as a child, back when such things were unheard of. Zara asked the woman's name. The woman smiled and introduced herself as Clara Morrison, named after her great-great-grandmother, Clara Whitmore. Zara's heart stopped. She asked if the woman knew about Abena. Clara Morrison's eyes filled with tears. She said that Abena was a legend in her family. Her great-great-grandmother had spoken of Abena until the day she died, calling her the bravest woman she had ever known. The friendship between Abena and Clara Whitmore had been passed down through generations as a story of hope and courage. The two women stood together, descendants of slave and slave owner, united by the legacy of two women who had refused to let hate divide them. Clara Morrison told Zara that her grandmother had kept records too, including letters from Abena. Perhaps they could combine their collections and ensure this story was never forgotten. Zara agreed immediately. She explained that she had opened a law firm in Abena's name, fighting for justice just as their ancestors had. Clara Morrison took Zara's hand and told her that Abena would be so proud. Both of them would be. Epilogue. Today, the story of Abena and Clara is taught in schools across the South. Their letters have been published in a book called Unbroken, A Friendship That Transcended Slavery. The proceeds go to scholarships for underprivileged students. Zara Washington's law firm has grown to 15 attorneys. They take on cases of discrimination, fighting for people who have no voice. Every new lawyer who joins the firm is given a copy of Abena's words. You are free when you free others. Clara Morrison worked with Zara to establish a foundation that builds schools in underserved communities. They named it the Abena Clara Foundation, honoring both women who started it all. And on the site where that first school stood, they erected a monument. It shows two women, one black and one white, standing side by side. Between them is a book, open to a page with words written on it. Those who visit the monument can read the inscription. In 1855, a slave named Abena risked everything to teach a child named Clara to read. In 1867, Clara risked everything to give freed slaves education and hope. Their friendship transcended the hatred of their time and created a legacy that lives on today. This monument stands as a reminder that freedom is not just the absence of chains, it is the presence of justice, education, and love. When we free others, we free ourselves. Zara visits the monument twice a year, once on the anniversary of Abena's escape and once on the day Clara's school opened. Each time she brings flowers and reads Abena's letters aloud to whoever is there. Because the story of the unbroken must never be forgotten. And the fight for freedom must never end.